All right, we're at episode 8. I got my helper Waylon, and we're going to continue putting some more parts on this bike. We are running out of parts that we have, and so today we're going to put on headlight, crash bar, floorboards, and the clutch and brake assembly, brake controls. So follow along. So since the last episode, we were able to find the correct hardware for the rear part of the fender that hinges up. So we'll get started on this. So the one side has it's actually got a square hole for that carriage style bolt. Got my helper putting it all together. The other way, Waylon, clockwise. So while Waylon's tightening up that bolt, I'm going to show you a this is a 1942 Canadian only rear tail light and its components. So these are glass lenses. This is the receiver. The bulbs go in there. And on the back side, this is where your wiring goes in. Come out like that. This is a 1 year only tail light for Canadian only. 43 was different. They had like bullet lights, and American had the larger lights, single and then a double. Not exactly sure on all the years, but if you have one of these, I need another one. Now you have to go the other way on that one. This way. So tighten it up by hand first. Okay. Okay, now let's get the crash bar on. So the crash bar, and then it has two U-clamps that bolt on through the front tube of the frame. So here's another box of old parts. So here's we need a brake pedal. Here's one. So you can see the 3 bolts holes. That one's right. See how that one has an extra hole? So we'll use this one. That'll work. So here we have the brake side strap, and put the brake pedal on, washer, lock washer, and so we got the clutch cable attached. So what we're going to do is this actually goes behind the crash bar. So we got the clutch cable attached to the back of the pedal, and it goes between the crash bar and onto that front stud. Then it attaches back here. Put a washer and nut on. And that holds the primary on. And if you had a crash bar, if we had a crash bar for this bike, there's another mount that would come down here and holds up this side of the skid plate.
Okay, done.
Is it tight?
Almost.
Okay, now do the front one after that one's tight. So then we'll put the brake rod onto this point with a cotter pin. So now when we'll have to set the arm, but when we push forward, that's when it'll engage the brake. So what we'll do is we'll put the front exhaust pipe on. We're gonna still have to find a whole bunch of our mounting brackets. This is one of the more tedious parts, is getting the pipe in the right direction and in to the head. I've had the original ones fit perfectly. The aftermarket ones some of them are just completely junk. Like, they just do not fit. And then it gets close to the oil pump, so you got to keep your eye out on that. And then your back muffler will go on here. Clamp goes here, clamp goes there, clamp goes in the back, and there's a clamp that goes in the front here. So yesterday I was able to find the correct bolts, but as you can see how this one's not sitting, it's because there's a bunch of putty here, Bondo. So, you know, this is, again, temporary. This is mock-up purposes. But when we get to a point where we start redoing, you know, take the tanks down to the bare metal, then we'll be able to, you know, kind of judge what's going on here. And once we take all that putty off, this should sit flat because this is an original gate. So the aftermarket gates, you know, I've had one in the past trying to get this on, and it had to be 3/8 of an inch off where they would never sit flat. It was just really poor quality. So here's some of the shifters that we've you know, kind of collected over the years. Just got them sitting on the shelf. This is probably our best bet here. They all have different angles and stuff, and the curves are different. So we'll try this one on. All right, so Waylon's gonna put the shifter in. So you put the shifter in from the top. You got to kind of work it down. There's a pivot point here on the tank. So go past here. You got to kind of snake it through. Get to the second one. And there you go. So we'll put the pivot point on right away. So now Waylon's going to put the bolt in from the back side. Attach the shifter rod to it, and then here. We had to recut the threads on this specific shifter pivot bolt because the company that sold it chromed the thread, so nut wouldn't even go on. So we got the pivot bolt tightened. Then this is the shifter rod that goes from the transmission and the adjustments here. So we got that all hooked up. So now this can go back and forth. Shifts, moves the transmission back. So another part that we found yesterday, we found another one of these very specific bolts in another pile of hardware we'd bought over the years. So that was a lucky find. So now we got the clutch installed. This needs some grease, but that's how you would engage the clutch. So one of the things when you're riding these old bikes that you'll have to do and encounter is you have to adjust your primary chain and your secondary chain. So your primary chain, how you adjust it is you have to loosen the 3 bolts on the bottom of the transmission, and then there's an adjustment bolt on the back of the transmission, and that'll pull the transmission backwards towards the back wheel. So what that does is that'll tighten your primary chain here. So you want everything's in the manual, but I think it's like a 1/4 inch or just over 3/8 of an inch, a bit of slack. You just want a bit of slack on there. But when you do that, so then you tighten it down, and just watch when you're tightening, because when you tighten it, you actually probably tighten up your chain even more. So you really want to keep an eye on it while you're tightening it down. So once you do that, now you've changed, the geometry of where it goes onto the shifter and into the gate. So what you have to do is you have to loosen this up. You have to tighten this up, like take this bolt off, screw this back on, or extend it. Depends on the adjustment. And you'll find out if it pops out of gear, you'll need to adjust it more. Or if it's hard to get into a gear, you'll have to adjust it more, because it'll either hit on the front or on the back. So you want to find that real nice spot in between. So it goes into first really nice, and then it stays into third really nice. So when you do that, when you pull that transmission back, what's going to happen now is, so you're pulling it back towards the back wheel. Now you're going to have more slack in your rear chain. So at that point, that's where you have to loosen up your back axle, take your axle adjusters, push the axle back until your chain's tight. Once you've done that and you're satisfied with your rear chain, now you have to adjust your brake rod. So because now you're moving the tire back, you might need to adjust the brake rod. So you'd take this pin out, you screw this in or out, and then that'll dictate where your pedal goes. So it's just a few things, but tightening the primary chain changes the geometry of the shifter in the gate, which then changes how tight your rear chain is, which then changes the pedal action on your brake. So it all ties together. One of the other things we found yesterday was a brake handle and mount. We're still missing the cable, and we found the adjuster screw and the part for the end of the cable and the pin that goes to the brake arm that would be in this position here. So we pulled out all our floorboards. Some of them are quite rough. Here's an aftermarket set. These will work. We still need to find all the correct mounts. The rubber ones are post-war. Steel ones are war issue because of rubber shortage. They went to a steel floorboard mat. So we got the floorboards together with the proper mounts. One goes in here, one goes in there on that side. And same with this side. One goes there, one goes there. So we'll get those mounted right away. One of the other things I wanted to show you what that makes a Canadian versus an American bike unique is the oil and fuel lines are all this rubberized neoprene, I think that's what they are, oil lines and fuel line. So on our in-process restoration of this 1942 Harley, you can see the oil lines and the flex. That was that's a Canadian only specification. They're normally a solid steel oil lines that are pre-bent that follow those same lines. It's just another interesting difference between a WLA and a WLC. So we got our floorboard here. Always gotta kind of pull this out. And put on the bolts, and we'll tighten those up. You can see this is also not correct. Shouldn't be a pipe plug. We'll have to find a new plug for that. We should have one lying around. Another poor point on these 45s is the kickstand spring. They're never really that great. I've tried all kinds, and they're just not, they don't have a lot of spring back. What I've done in the past, just as a precautionary, is I run a zip tie around here in a loop, and I'll just throw it over top just as a safety, just to hold that. Yeah, because I've ridden down the road, and with vibration, these kickstands have come out. That's not a good thing. So just be wary when you're riding these, that the kickstand spring is just not a great return spring. It doesn't hold it very well, and you know, if you want to use that idea of just literally put a loop and then you just kind of loop it on. That's on. We got the shifter on. We still need that hose, the coil, fuel lines and all that, fuel filter. I think I have one of those lying around. So getting closer. There should also be on the 42 WLC a front stand. I don't have one with this one. It would have longer studs, and it literally kicks out the front end and allows you to change a tire just like the rear. It's literally a front stand. So still got to find one of those. Mud flap, that's always one of the things at the end that you'd put on. Your designations on the tank, military. This would all be green. There'd be no chrome. So anything that's chromed, that would all be stripped and painted green. So same thing on this side. Got to get this just kind of right. They'll go on like that. Put the hardware on. Sometimes you have to use a spacer on the inside or outside. And there's a bunch of different mounting studs. I'm not sure how many. There's probably, probably another 10 different ones. Big twin versus 45 versus swing arm versus different types of floorboards. So you gotta make sure that when you're buying them, you buy them for a 45. If you're working on a 45, just apply them to the bike that you're working on. One of the other things we were able to come across that we had is the muffler. So it slides over the front. There's a mount that goes here with a bolt that goes there, and then there's another clamp that goes here and goes here. So we still have to find the stud, the proper stud that goes in here. I think I have one for the brake arm. So we'll put this on. I'm missing this clamp that goes around the muffler itself to this point. I don't have one, but we'll get these bolted on in a second. So here's a specific bolt that goes into the rear brake anchor. So you can see right here how it allows it to go back and forth. That's for chain adjustment. So the whole mechanism can just go back and forth. So we got the brake anchor installed. We got the muffler mount here bolted onto the back of the behind the transmission. Another mount here. The rear head pipes on, the front head pipes on. We're missing a mount here, and we're missing a mount that would go from here around here and loop it. Just don't have that. That's a correct slanted 42, I believe, muffler. Again, we're missing this bracket. We're missing the chain guard. The oil lines aren't installed. So I just threw it on just to show you what it looks like. That's a 42 Canadian front fender toolbox. And this is an original light, blackout light that would go right there. So this is the only one I ever seen, only one I ever come across. They do make these now reproduction, so we'll have to get one. I do have another toolbox, but it's new old stock. So we'll have to put that on later. But so you can see we're still missing a horn. You know, we're missing a bunch of parts still, but looks like a 1942 Harley. So this is one of the other things that makes a 1942 Canadian bike different from a WLA. So this is the lever and the mount, and this is for the clutch. So this cable goes on. This is a hand clutch. Yes, it also has a foot clutch, but this is an auxiliary hand clutch, Canadian only. And what's neat about it is Harley never came out till 52 with a hand clutch for the pan head with a foot shift. But what this allowed was if you're in some mud and you need both feet down, you'd pull in the clutch and with your hand and still be able to put both feet down, because with a foot clutch it's very difficult. So what would happen is the operator would fall over on the bike, because with the foot clutch, you're rocking it back and forth to go forward, toe to go, heel back for the clutch. So this auxiliary hand clutch really was an important feature that the Canadian government wanted on their bike. One of the other things we'll have to do is, put a new, put a speedo in it, put the proper ignition on. That's all final stage for us. That's how we do it here. We need some bolts for the tank divider. Those are specific. I think those are 1/4 28. So got to find those bolts. And with that last part put on, that's the end of this series. We're gonna have to find more parts in the future, and continue the mock-up of this bike. But at this point, we just ran out of parts. So what I want to do is I want to thank you, each and every one of you, for following this series. It's a quite amazing journey that we're doing on this YouTube, and to see the people from all over the world watching what we do in our basement workshop. I just want to say thanks. And thanks, Will Allen, for some of the help.
Please like and subscribe.
Follow our channel. This is who we are. This is what we do. We're Save the Rust. Thank you. So if you enjoyed the series on our 1942 Canadian military mock-up, follow along as we finish building this 1942 Harley and have it running for this spring, 2024.